Welcome to Pilates Elephants. I'm your host, Raphael Bender. Do you ever wonder why after some classes, your clients come back and say, gosh, golly, I was so sore after that class. That was amazing. Can we do that again? And then you sometimes struggle to make them sore after class. Well, imagine if you could dial up that good soreness every class, every single time. Well, I'm going to teach you exactly how to do that according to science. And, for good or ill, whether it's true or not, which it actually isn't true, but many clients associate soreness with the workout being effective. So that feeling can make them feel like they're doing good, they're progressing, and it makes them want to keep coming back, which in turn actually makes the workout effective because the workout you do is the workout that works best. So we're going to explore how to use our science in reverse to make people sore after every single workout. And when I say use our science in reverse, there's an awful lot of science and research on how to reduce muscle soreness after exercise. And we're just going to do the opposite. So, dear listener, what I'm about to share with you will give you great power. All right, so I'm basing everything I'm going to talk about in this episode on a few systematic reviews on what's called the repeated bout effect. And the repeated bout effect is something that in exercise science research, researchers say when a muscle experiences an intense or unfamiliar exercise, and especially eccentric exercise, so when the muscle fibers are lengthening whilst they're contracting, then you feel more sore after that. Now, it's hypothesized that this is due to microscopic muscle damage, although we don't really know. And soreness after exercise does somewhat correlate to muscle damage, but recovery from soreness doesn't correlate with recovery from muscle damage. So there's some kind of relationship there, but we're not quite sure what it is. But when you repeat that same exercise, the body adapts, and that leads to reduced soreness, faster recovery, and less perception of muscle damage. So less pain, in other words, less stiffness, less perceived muscle damage. And this perceived or this protective adaptation, it's not just perceived, it also does increase your recovery speed. This protective adaptation is called the repeated bout effect. So in other words, when you do an unfamiliar bout of intense exercise, but particularly eccentric or lengthening exercise, you get super sore for a few days after. But when you do, excuse me, dear listener, when you do more bouts, like a second bout of that same form of exercise, it has a much less, you get much less soreness after a second bout. And that protective effect after a second bout is called the repeated bout effect. And that explains, dear listener, why your clients get really sore after a class and then you teach the exact same class again in hoping to make them sore, and it doesn't make them sore. And the reason it didn't make them sore is because it's the exact same class you taught the first time, and they're experiencing the repeated bout effect. And that gives us a clue as to what we can do to make it in reverse, make them more sore. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So firstly, just a quick think about what is the repeated bout effect. Well, we talked about what it is, but what causes the repeated bout effect. And the short answer is we don't really know what causes the repeated bout effect. There are a few different proposed mechanisms for why a second bout of the same form of exercise within a week or so gives you much less soreness, like there's protection against that soreness. First one is neural adaptation. So you basically improve your coordination, you recruit your motor units more effectively, which reduces muscle strain. So you're basically recruiting more motor units, so there's less strain on each motor unit, so there's less damage, less soreness. Another theory is extracellular matrix remodeling. So structural changes in the muscle's extracellular matrix, so basically the fascia, essentially, around the muscle, like collagen production strengthens the muscle resilience and protects against further damage. So you basically stiffen up the muscle extracellular matrix. Reduced inflammatory response after initial bout. Your immune system is proposed to have a less intense response after the same form of exercise again, meaning fewer inflammatory markers, less swelling. Increased muscle stiffness and fiber strengthening is another one. When you increase the muscle stiffness after eccentric exercise by probably increased collagen production, amongst other things, you potentially reduce the impact of repeated workouts. But the short version is like we really don't know. Those are all kind of like hypotheses about why the repeated bout effect exists, but we don't really know. All right, so why does this all matter? Well, we've got the repeated bout effect that protects people against soreness when you do the same workout again. So guess what? If we do the opposite, we're going to increase soreness, dear listener. So I'm going to give you 4 evidence-based strategies to increase muscle soreness using the repeated bout effect in reverse. And here's the first one, and it's rotating eccentric-focused exercises each class. So what I mean by this is not necessarily doing rotational exercises, but rotating different exercises. So one week you might do lunges, the next week you might do step downs, the next week you might do side leg, loaded side splits. So just doing different exercises each week. So you never do the same workout twice within a week. So you never do the same intense eccentric exercise twice within a week. So if you do a lot of deep lunges, then the next time, don't do lunges, do something different, splits, or squats, or jump board, side leg lifts. Do something different as your intense focus within that session. And then once you've gone for 4 or 5 weeks, you can go back to the original exercise again because they've now become resensitized to that movement. And so by constantly introducing new eccentric movements, you'll prevent your client's muscles from adapting. And that way, every workout's like their first workout. So they get sore every time. So use different exercises each class. And if you're emphasizing the eccentric, the lowering phase of the movement, so going as deep as possible and relatively slowly into the eccentric phase, so deep into the lunge, deep into the squat, deep into the Bulgarian squat, deep into the whatever it is that you're doing, and emphasizing a slow, controlled eccentric. And the concentric can be fast, it doesn't matter, but the eccentric should be relatively slow. When I say slow and controlled, just like slow enough that you're controlling it. It doesn't have to be super slow. 1 or 2 seconds is totally fine. And you need to go pretty close to failure. So when we say an intense bout of eccentric exercise, you need to get relatively close to failure. Now, it doesn't matter whether you get the burn during the workout or not, but it needs to be intense enough that the last couple of reps are really freaking hard. All right, so that is strategy number 1. Rotate your eccentric-focused exercises each class. Strategy number 2, to make your clients sore after every class forever, is increase time under tension on eccentric moves. Now, we know that it's particularly the eccentric phase that of novel eccentric exercises that causes muscle soreness. And so if we put more emphasis on the eccentric phase, we will induce more muscle soreness. So if you can create exercises where there is more tension on the muscle and you spend more time in that position as the muscle lengthens. And the more you can lengthen the muscle and add tension as you lengthen, the more you will increase muscle soreness. So for example, if you're doing side splits on a light spring on the reformer, even though as you push the carriage out, the spring assists you more because the spring stretches, there's more tension on the spring. But as you push the carriage out, also the vector of the force of your legs pushing into the carriage actually outpaces the increase of tension on the spring, depending on your body weight. But if you're sort of relatively heavy compared to the spring that you choose, so if you're doing it on a light spring, then the further you go out, the harder it is. So that's an example of an exercise where as you get deep into the eccentric part of the movement, there's actually more tension on the muscles in the eccentric part. And the more you come in the movement, actually the less tension there is. Deep lunges are another example where the deeper you go into the movement and the more you hinge your torso forward as you go into the movement, the more tension there is on both your gluteus maximus and also your adductor magnus on your inner thigh. So deep lunges, lowering slowly as deep as you can go. Can you go a little bit deeper? And hinging your torso forward as you do so, which increases the angle of hip flexion, which essentially lengthens the muscles, is going to stimulate more muscle soreness. All right, so that was tip number 2, increasing time under tension on eccentric moves and going deeper into the moves. Tip number 3, add new angles and planes of motion. So if you're thinking, holy crap, I don't know enough eccentric exercises to rotate, I teach 5 days a week. I teach 3 classes a day, 5 days a week. How can I rotate new eccentric leg exercises or arm exercises or ab exercises every week, every class? Well, you don't have to do it like, oh, I've already done lunges this month, I can't do them. Like, do a slight change in the angle and plane of motion. So do lunges with your foot diagonally outwards, your knee diagonally outwards. Do lunges with your torso twisted, with your hip in more external rotation, right? Change the position of the limbs so that different muscle fibers are engaged. And so even though, yes, it's a lunge, you're engaging a slightly different set of muscle fibers. So for those muscle fibers, it's an unaccustomed exercise. Even though you did lunges last week, but now you're doing them with your torso rotated and the hip externally rotated, so you're engaging different set of muscle fibers within that glute. So that is how you can promote additional muscle soreness. And the abs are a fantastic example of how to do this if you're doing things like side bends on the box, side overs or, whatever you want to call them. If you change the angle of the torso, so you can do them directly sideways one week and then do them rotated a bit forwards the next week, rotated a bit backwards the next week. And you will engage different parts of the oblique and quadratus lumborum and erector spinae muscles, and you'll get more soreness. All right, so that is tip number 3, add new angles and planes of movement. So you can now create your class based around variations on the exercises you love to teach with just the feet, the arms, the torso in a slightly different position. So we're working different parts of the muscle, and thus it's all brand new exercise for that part of the muscle that you're working. Okay, the 4th tip is to add eccentric overload using bilateral concentric and unilateral eccentric movements. So bilateral just means both sides. Bi means 2 and lateral means sides. So bilateral means 2 arms or 2 legs. And unilateral just means one side. Uni means one. So concentric is the lifting phase and eccentric is the lowering phase. Or technically, concentric is the shortening phase of the muscle and eccentric is the lengthening phase. So for example, the concept of eccentric overload comes in is the concept is that, well, the reality is that we can lower more than we can lift, right? So if there was if you got the largest rock that you could pick up off the floor and put on a table, whatever size rock that was, you could take a bigger rock off the table and put it on the floor, right? So whatever size rock you can lift up, you can lower a bigger rock. And that is the same for any loaded movement. Whatever size weight or spring or band or whatever you can lift up, you can lower a bigger or heavier or more tension spring, band, or weight. And so if you can create an amount of tension that is too much for one leg or arm to lift, this is much easier on the arms than it is on the legs, then you can lift it with both arms or both legs and lower it with just one arm or leg, right? Or you can do this with your torso as well. You can, lift yourself up with your arms and then lower yourself down with your abs, for example. So I'm going to give you a couple of leg examples, a couple of arm examples. So, I'll give you one leg example because I think on the reformer it's difficult to find these with the legs, but with the arms it's pretty darn easy. And the reason with legs is difficult is just there's just not enough spring tension on the reformer for most people that they literally can't move the carriage with one leg. But, we can do an approximation. So this would simply be in footwork where you push out with two legs and return in with one leg. And so this would have to be with all springs on. Or, just thought of one, a really good one that you could do eccentric overload on would be shoulder bridge on a light spring. So if you have your feet on the foot bar, lying on the carriage, a light spring, I'm talking like one red or one full spring, maybe 1.5 full springs, that is too light, too strong, in other words, for you to pull the carriage in with one leg. So what you would do is you would push the carriage out till your legs are straight with your hips up off the carriage, pull the carriage in with both legs, and then lift one leg off and push the carriage out with one leg. Put the other leg back, pull the carriage in with both legs, that's the concentric, and then push the carriage out with one leg. But you're not really pushing out, you're really eccentrically controlling out. And the spring has to be light enough, or in other words, challenging enough, that you can't pull the carriage in with just one leg. It's too strong. So you need both legs to pull it in, and then you actually go beyond your concentric 1RM and you lower it, or you push the carriage away with one leg. Now with the arms, it's super easy because the springs on the reformer are plenty strong for most people where you can add enough springs where they can't do it with one arm. So you could simply do, say, a rowing movement, kneeling facing the pulleys, where you put on enough springs, 2 springs, 3 springs, whatever that is, depending on the strength of the person, where they literally can't pull the strap with one arm. So you get them to pull the straps with 2 arms and then release the strap slowly control the eccentric with one arm. Then they pull with both arms, then release with one arm. And you could do the same with a push movement, same with a side, like a lateral raise movement, kneeling facing side. You could do it with a long stretch, kneeling facing the foot bar, hands on the foot bar. Find a load that they can't push the carriage away with just one arm, like maybe 2 springs, 3 springs, whatever it is. Push with both arms and then take one hand off and control the return with one arm. So that is an eccentric overload using bilateral concentric and unilateral eccentric. So dear listener, we've got our 4 science-based tips to use the repeated bout effect in reverse to increase muscle soreness so that your clients are sore after every class forever and for all time. And it's only your classes where they're always sore after every class, no matter how many years they've been coming to see you. And the first one is rotate eccentric-focused exercises. So you just do a different eccentric-focused exercise each class. The second one is to increase time under tension on eccentric moves. So go deep into the move. Pick moves where you can increase the tension as they go deeper into the move, like side splits on a light spring, deep lunges with a hip hinge forwards. Third one is add new angles and planes of motion. Do the same old plain vanilla exercises you normally do, but just rotate the hips out or in, or bend the knee a bit more, or change the angle of the torso so that you're working a slightly different part of the muscle, and you will be exempt from the repeated bout effect for those new parts of the muscle. And the final one is add eccentric overload using bilateral concentric and unilateral eccentric movements. Push out with 2 arms or 2 legs, and then lower down with 1 arm or 1 leg. And you can do that with your abs as well, where you might push up with your hands and lower down with your abs. For example, if you were doing, say, a round back off the box, where you use your arms to hold onto the box to lift you up, and then you take your hands off and lower down with your abs. So that, dear listener, are my 4 science-based tips. And I hope you use your powers to make people sore if they want to be sore. And of course, if you were a white wizard or witch or a Jedi Knight, you might choose to use the repeated bout effect not in reverse. And if you want your clients to never be sore, then just do the opposite of these 4 things. And do teach the same exercises every week, and don't do novel eccentric exercises. And when you do introduce clients to eccentric exercises, start with light intensity. Don't go super deep into the movement. Don't do high volume, and gradually build it up. And that would be the reverse of the reverse, which would be how to elicit the repeated bout effect, and minimize or eliminate soreness for your clients. All right, dear listener, I hope you found that useful. Let me know what you think, and much love, and I'll see you in the next one.